All right, greetings and welcome to More the Podcast, a Youth for Christ International podcast. I'm hosting, once again, there seems to be only one host, and that's me, Martin Ainsworth. And I'm here talking to Ryan Doherty. Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm well.
Now, this is the first time that we're meeting.
It is.
I think I've seen you around the office before.
Yeah, I think we met one time, but it was probably pre-pandemic,
Right.
the olden days.
In old times.
Yeah.
Back before we had a lot of the skills that we now have to be online and stuff like that. So I'm really intrigued, Ryan. I'm really intrigued in what it is you actually do, because I genuinely have no clue, and you're about to find out.
Yes, I'm about to find out what I do.
So tell me, if somebody said, hey, what do you do? What's the official line in what you do?
It takes more than one line, but when people ask me, it depends on the context in which they're asking me. Because I work for Youth for Christ USA,
Right.
as a national chapter advancement specialist. So it's a bigger title and a big job, but our team oversees all the chapters within the U.S.
Right.
We work with their boards and executive directors and, just help problem solve, help resource, help them just with kind of everyday kind of problems, and also hiring and sometimes letting people go and shifting directions and that sort of thing. So that's the bulk of my job, is that.
Right.
But then on the other part of my job is as the Youth for Christ International Liaison for YFC USA. And in that role, I oversee WorldLink, which is our Youth for Christ International's kind of partnership from nation to nation, or from Youth for Christ chapter in the U.S. or Canada to nation.
Excellent.
So we build partnerships and try to get chapters and nations, or nations and nations, dialoguing, sharing resources, building relationships.
I mean, that's really interesting because, one, that's a massive role here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Two, that's a massive role connecting international with local USA. Thing that intrigues me the most, and I suppose I'd love to hear more about, is how you connect a nation somewhere around the world and pair it, I'd say, appropriately, but not necessarily appropriate. How do you make friends between a nation in the world and a state in the US? How does that actually work?
Yeah,
I could sense from your kind of like, yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, I'm going to think about this one.
well, there's two answers to that question. The first answer is the best way to do it is if it happens organically.
Right.
So things like General Assembly, when nations are already there, and then some chapters or leaders from chapters are go in there and they meet somebody, then it becomes really easy, because they've established some kind of foundation to build upon through their relationship. But occasionally, or probably several times a year, multiple times a year, I get contacted by a chapter that really has a passion for serving the movement of Youth for Christ outside of the U.S. And so they'll ask me, what opportunities are available to partner. And then I kind of utilize the connections that I have within YFC International and kind of seek to find a good fit for them. So usually what happens is a chapter contacts me, I do a little bit of research, then I come back with options for them, like 3 or 4 different nations that I think would be a good fit for them based on what they want to do.
Wow.
So for example, if they really want to do like Project Serve, or they want to have the opportunity to travel to that nation, well, there's some nations that are easier to travel to than other nations. And so, that becomes part of the equation. So I look at multiple different factors on how to build that equation and try to make a customized recommendation for them.
Well, I can probably tell you from experience that I've seen it in action. I've seen it working. So I've been in nations where a visiting team has come from a particular chapter or a particular office and brought a team of young people over. I'm trying to say, I always use the phrase recently because time is this kind of wibbly wobbly thing that, days and weeks and months all roll into one. I was in Honduras with a team, I think from North Carolina, who came in and have this wonderful partnership with the nation. And they brought a team of probably around about 30 young people who cleaned and painted and restored at the camp that they have, and then just engaged with the young people. And it was an amazing thing to see. Amazing to see the leaders sort of forming young minds, young Americans, but also these guys just having their minds blown by experiencing a different culture and a different way of doing ministry and just being able to serve. So seeing it in action is really quite amazing.
Yeah, I think, and right now is a really great time for that because we're coming out of the pandemic and there's a lot of young people that maybe before the pandemic, their churches had mission trips or things like that. And it's been on hiatus for the last 3 or 4 years. And so now they have the opportunity. We have an opportunity to kind of pounce on that and create opportunities for people to get connected to YFC in that way as well.
So General Assembly, are you going to be standing with a placard saying like, hey, I'm Ryan, I want to connect you with somebody? How does that work?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I will be there. We will be promoting WorldLink. This year we're rolling WorldLink out across YFC International.
Fantastic.
Previously, it was mostly in the U.S. and Canada did WorldLink partnerships, but we're trying to roll it out and say, what if nations and nations want to do partnerships or regions and regions and try to create more opportunities for kind of that interconnectedness. And
does that create another layer of like administrative dynamics? Because instead of being US to nation, it's more of ascending. When you're doing these parallel partnerships, that's going to add a whole different layer of complexity and fun to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's yet to be determined how that will impact us. But I think, if there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
We'll find a way to make it work.
And I have to say, Youth of Christ, both internationally and locally, we seem to come up with some really creative ways of making things happen.
I think you're absolutely right. And sometimes it's not always the best way. It's the most creative way.
Absolutely.
But sometimes the most creative way is the best way. And so, I think a lot of those problems just kind of work themselves out. It really, when people desire to see something happen, they make it happen.
Absolutely.
And I think YFC is probably one of the most creative organizations I've ever worked in, because sometimes you just have to figure out the best way or the least expensive way. How do we solve this problem and how do we get it done? And we always find a way to do it. I mean, with God's help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like spirit-led. I mean, I think sometimes we, the spirit kind of pushes in a direction and we're like, oh, what a fortuitous, we just happened to bump into them. It's like, no, you didn't happen to bump into them. God was like, when are you two actually going to finally get together and meet? So,
right.
So are you going to be at the brilliant mission share thing that's going to be happening? Are you going to be on the mission table? I'm making a real hash of this, but during General Assembly, on one of the afternoons, there's an afternoon of ministry sharing what they do and how to connect with each other. Do you have a table?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, I was just nodding there. Like, I was looking at me like kind of blank going, what are you talking about?
I do now.
He does now. We're going to figure out a way.
Yeah, we are having a night at the bowling alley for people to learn more about WorldLink as well.
Okay.
And then we'll also have nations there that receive support through WorldLink, and then there's some chapters from the U.S. and Canada that will be there. And so
fantastic.
We'll just have a little party in the bowling alley and hang out. And
I hear you got moved from the pub to the bowling alley.
We did, yeah. I wanted a happy hour, but we got.
It's like these guys are going to have way too much fun if we stick them.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's stick them in the bowling.
Yeah,
fantastic.
They know what kind of trouble I can get in, and I guess though.
Well, we look forward to that at General Assembly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for spending some
my
time
pleasure.
chatting away. As always, if you want to connect with Ryan, I imagine it's going to be ryan.doherty@yfc.net.
It's rdoherty@yfc.net.
I was almost close.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining. And I'm going to say this was probably episode number 15. I'm looking at Sam, who's looking at me. So this was episode number 15. If you want to check back and hear what any of the other guys have been talking about in the podcast, just scroll around and see what you can find. But as now, thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye. Ryan's going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
And what's your final word of wisdom that everybody can just lead with right now?
The world is much smaller than you think.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And goodbye.